The fluorescent lights of the corporate kitchen hummed, a monotonous sound that amplified the silence Sarah desperately tried to project. She was bent over the sink, scrubbing a coffee mug with a concentration that suggested she was defusing a bomb, not cleaning porcelain. Her crisp white blouse, meticulously ironed just 2 hours ago, was the only clean thing in the room. The air was thick with the cloying smell of burnt popcorn and cheap perfume. This was her reality, 5 days a week. The executive assistant who was in practice, the company's unacknowledged janitor. She tolerated it, not because she had to, but because she needed to be invisible. Invisibility was the only way to execute her mission. Well, look who decided to finally take a break from her scrubbing duties. The voice, a nasal, high-pitched drawl, belonged to Bethany, the head of marketing and the office's undisputed queen of casual cruelty. Bethany stood framed in the doorway, a venomous smirk playing on her lips, flanked by her 2 loyal lieutenants, Chloe and Denise. All 3 wore matching designer shift dresses and an air of entitled boredom. Sarah slowly straightened, turning with a practiced, neutral expression. "Good morning, Bethany. Did you need something?" Bethany didn't answer. She took a slow, deliberate sip from the large, paper cup she held, a logo for a popular artisan coffee chain prominently displayed. Her eyes dragged over Sarah's face, pausing on the small, silver locket Sarah always wore. "Oh, I think you know what I need, Sarah. The usual. The coffee order this morning was lukewarm. That's a fail. And frankly, this kitchen smells like poverty." She wrinkled her nose for effect. Chloe giggled, covering her mouth dramatically. "It really does. Maybe she should switch to pine needles. I hear that's organic." Sarah ignored the jibe, her calm a thin shield over simmering rage. "I'll remake your coffee immediately, Bethany. Anything else?" "Actually, yes," Bethany said, her voice dropping into a falsely sweet register. She glanced at Chloe, a signal passing between them. "I was just telling the girls about your exciting life, Sarah. Your husband, the one who runs a multinational import company that's always traveling overseas. We were wondering why he hasn't bought you out of this lovely little career yet." Sarah felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was the lie she constructed. A complicated, vague husband who was perpetually away and very successful. It was the only explanation she could offer for her intelligence and professionalism trapped in this menial role without revealing the impossible truth. "Marcus is very busy with his trade deals," Sarah replied smoothly, picking up the mug Bethany had just put down. "His company focuses on global logistics. It requires constant travel." Denise stepped forward, leaning against the counter. "Oh, is that why we found an eviction notice taped to the door of your luxury condo building yesterday, Sarah? Funny, I didn't think billionaires use that kind of paper." The blood drained from Sarah's face. They had followed her, her carefully constructed facade, the reason she was risking her reputation and her marriage to stay here, was crumbling around her. They knew. "That's harassment," Sarah managed, her voice shaking slightly, betraying her. "You have no right to follow me. Rights, dignity, respect." Bethany sighed dramatically, pushing the button on the Coca-Cola dispenser machine on the counter. The sickeningly sweet smell of the soda filled the room. "These are things you earn, Sarah, and frankly, after that performance this morning, I'm not sure you've earned enough to keep your pride." She waited for the stream of dark soda to fill her paper cup. Then, instead of lifting it to drink, she took a deliberate step toward Sarah. "You're a liar, Sarah," Bethany hissed, her eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. "And you and your husband are nothing but a joke." With a sudden, violent movement, Bethany raised a large cup and hurled the entire contents, the fizzy, sticky sweet Coca-Cola, straight at Sarah's chest. It hit with a sickening splash. The cold, dark liquid exploded across Sarah's pristine white blouse, drenching her from her neck to her waist. The sugar immediately began to soak into the fabric, making the material stick to her skin. The room was instantly silent, save for the dripping sound of the cola hitting the stainless steel sink. Sarah stood motionless, completely saturated, the dark stain spreading across her chest like a wound. The humiliation was total, public, and utterly dehumanizing. She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream, to lash out, to tell these insignificant people exactly who she was and whose name they were about to destroy. "Now, clean that up," Bethany ordered, her voice flat with contempt, tossing the empty cup onto the floor. She turned to her friends, who were doubled over in silent, shaking laughter. "Come on, girls. We have a budget meeting." And I don't want to miss the look on her face when she realizes she can't even afford to replace that cheap shirt. As the three women swept out, their heels clicking triumphantly down the hall, Sarah opened her eyes. She looked down at the dark, sticky stain, then clenched her fists, her knuckles white. She didn't move toward the cleaning supplies. The humiliation was too potent. It was here, in this moment, that she was supposed to feel broken. But the cold cola triggered something else entirely, a blinding, righteous fury. She reached for the cell phone tucked into the pocket of her soaking blouse. The screen was sticky, but she didn't care. She found the number she had sworn not to call until her mission was complete. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice rough, the rage finally breaking through. "I need you to come to the office. Now. And don't come as my traveling husband. I want you to come as the man who owns 40% of this company." A deep, powerful voice answered immediately, stripped of its usual warmth. "I see the email, Sarah. What happened? Tell me exactly what happened. And don't leave out a single sticky detail." Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath, the sugary air burning her lungs. "They threw Coca-Cola on me, Marcus. They did it because they thought they could shame a cleaner's daughter. And you know what the worst part is? I let them." "Not anymore." Marcus's voice boomed over the line, carrying the unmistakable cold steel of a billionaire's absolute authority. "Don't move. Don't speak. Don't clean a thing. I'm 10 minutes away. And when I walk in, I'm not just firing the three who did this. I'm going to find every single person who enabled this toxic culture, and I'm going to fire everyone who looked the other way." He hung up. Sarah stood there, dripping, the stain of Marcus' shame and a badge of honor. She knew what was coming. It would be chaos. It would be war. But her quiet mission was over. It was time for her husband to unleash the storm. The 15 minutes that followed Marcus's call were the longest in Sarah's life. The Coca-Cola was sticky cold and already beginning to feel crusty against her skin. But she didn't move. She stood sentinel in the sterile corporate kitchen, her face a mask of stone, listening to the triumphant, muffled laughter filtering in from the main office floor. She was a time bomb of dignity, waiting for her fuse to be lit. The silence was broken not by a bell or a knock, but by a sudden collective hush that swept the entire 18th floor. It wasn't the silence of respect, but the terrified, visceral silence that heralds the arrival of absolute, undeniable power. The door to the kitchen swung open, and the silence seemed to enter with him. Marcus Montgomery. He was a man who didn't just command attention. He demanded the rearrangement of the very air around him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, the kind of tailoring that whispered 7 figures instead of shouting it. He carried himself with the quiet, effortless weight of a man who moved markets and controlled continents. His expression was not one of fury, but of chilling, surgical calm. He saw Sarah immediately. His gaze swept over the pristine mahogany floor, the stainless steel, and finally locked onto the large, ugly, dark stain covering his wife's white blouse. His eyes darkened to the color of frozen charcoal. Bethany, who had just stepped into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, froze solid. She recognized Marcus Montgomery instantly, not as Sarah's traveling logistics husband, but as the founder and majority shareholder of Montgomery Capital, the entity that held 40% controlling interest in this entire holding corporation. Mr. Montgomery," Bethany stammered, dropping her glass. It shattered on the floor, adding a frantic, sharp noise to the terrifying silence. Marcus ignored her completely. He walked straight past her, his gaze fixed only on Sarah. He didn't rush. He moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a judge approaching the bench. He reached her side and gently placed a single hand on her shoulder, his warmth a searing contrast to the cold soda. "Hello, darling," he murmured, his voice low, private, and vibrating with suppressed thunder. "I see you followed my instructions. Didn't clean a thing. I was waiting for you to handle the final details, Marcus, Sarah replied, her voice steady, finally giving herself permission to shed the mask of the subservient assistant. He nodded once, kissed her forehead, and then turned his cold, diamond-hard gaze onto Bethany, who was hyperventilating beside the shattered glass. Marcus, he stated, his voice now loud enough to echo in the hallway, drawing the horrified gazes of every employee. I believe you are head of marketing here. Bethany, is it? Yes, sir. Be Bethany Reynolds, she squeaked, trying to regain her composure. I can explain. It was an accident. We were just... Marcus cut her off with a slight raise of his hand, a gesture that stopped her torrent of lies instantly. I don't need your explanation, Bethany. I need the truth. He pulled out his own cell phone, an executive model, and made a single, non-challenge gesture. This call is being recorded. Now, tell me on the record, do you know what my wife was doing here for the last 6 months? Bethany looked from Sarah's stained shirt to Marcus's intimidating presence, her mind cycling through furious attempts to salvage the situation. She was our administrative assistant, sir, a cleaner's daughter. Marcus's lips curled into a silent, lethal smile. Close. She was conducting due diligence for the Montgomery Family Foundation on the toxic work culture of the subsidiary. She was gathering evidence of the systemic abuse, the wage suppression, and the discriminatory practices against every single minority employee in this building. And you, Bethany, just provided the grand finale. A collective, massive gasp swept across the hallway. Chloe and Denise, who had been lurking near the water cooler, now melted into the nearest cubicle wall, their faces white. Now, Marcus continued, his voice rising, a cold, deadly steel entering his tone. I will not waste time on performative firings. The 3 of you will be dealt with legally, but I have a much bigger problem, and that problem is systemic. He turned away from Sarah and began walking out of the kitchen, directly into the wide, panic-stricken open-plan office. He stopped in the center, towering over the dozens of frozen desks. Where's the CEO, Mr. Hawthorne? Marcus demanded, his voice ringing with pure command. A terrified, balding man in an ill-fitting suit shuffled forward. I'm right here, sir. James Hawthorne. We were just about to start our meeting. Cancel it, Marcus ordered. I own 40% of your life, Mr. Hawthorne. Your job is now to sit down and watch the total dissolution of your entire organization. Marcus then addressed the entire floor, his voice echoing over the sudden, absolute silence. Listen up, everyone. For the last 6 months, my wife has been working here, humiliated, abused, and systematically degraded. Not because she needed the money, we don't, but because she needed to see the corporate soul of this building up close. And the soul I found is rotten. He pointed to a large, imposing office door at the end of the hall, the manager's office. Before I fire all of you, I want the manager who enabled this culture. Send him out. Now. A small, thin man named Mr. Thompson, the mid-level manager who oversaw the administrative staff, slowly emerged, his face pale and slick with sweat. Mr. Thompson, Marcus said, his voice quiet, unnervingly conversational. I have reviewed the HR complaint log. Sarah filed reports about the harassment, the microaggressions, the dismissals, the casual cruelty, every single week for 3 months. And every single time, you filed a report under frivolous. Is that correct? Thompson stammered. I was following protocol, Mr. Montgomery. We don't have time for petty office drama. I told Sarah to toughen up. Marcus walked toward Thompson, his eyes never leaving the manager's face. Toughen up, he repeated, tilting his head. You told the co-founder of the largest philanthropic organization in the world to toughen up because you complained about systemic toxicity in your workplace. Fascinating. He stopped directly in front of Thompson. I am not going to fire you, Mr. Thompson. That would be too quick. Instead, effective immediately, you are being moved to my wife's former position. You'll be responsible for every cleaning duty, every coffee run, and every filing error in this entire department for 1 year, without salary. Your executive title is gone. Your stock options are revoked. Your dignity is forfeit. That, sir, is your opportunity to toughen up. Now get the broom and start sweeping up that glass. Thompson collapsed into his chair, a defeated wreck, as Marcus pivoted back to the stunned office floor. Now for the rest of you. Marcus's voice was sharp, cutting through the shock. Everyone who witnessed this humiliation and said nothing, everyone who laughed, everyone who looked the other way, consider this your final lesson in corporate compliance and moral clarity. He pulled out a certified, stamped document from his jacket pocket. Effective immediately, by majority shareholder order, this entire division is being placed under immediate suspension. Your access badges are now worthless. Your positions are terminated. You have 30 minutes to clear your desks. Security will escort you out. Chaos erupted. Screams, desperate pleading, and frantic attempts to grab personal belongings filled the air. Marcus didn't flinch. He walked back to Sarah, his back to the hysteria he had unleashed. "The company needs a cleansing fire, Sarah," he murmured, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "And you gave me the match." Sarah looked out at the collapse of the entire corporate floor, the shrieking, the begging, the raw panic, and saw not vengeance but justice. "Thank you, Marcus. But the job isn't done. The humiliation was public. The justice needs to be permanent." Marcus nodded. "The permanent part is already in motion. We are using your reports to file a class action suit against the parent company for a hostile work environment and systemic discrimination. Your pain is about to become a very expensive education for every executive in the city." Marcus and Sarah stood on the sidewalk across the street, watching the forced exodus. A line of stunned, former employees stood huddled, clutching boxes of office supplies and looking utterly broken. "They look shocked," Sarah observed, the sticky coldness of the cola finally being replaced by a sense of deep, abiding warmth. "They never thought the system would turn on them." "The system didn't turn on them, darling," Marcus corrected, pulling her close. "We did. We simply weaponized the rules they thought only applied to the powerless." He gestured to a large, sleek black SUV pulling up to the curb. Inside, a woman in a legal suit sat waiting. "That is my chief counsel, Amelia. She has the paperwork for the final step," Marcus explained. "We're not just dissolving the company. We're replacing it." Sarah got into the car with Marcus. Amelia quickly slid over a polished tablet. "Sarah," Amelia began, her voice crisp and professional, "Marcus and I have spent the last 3 hours legally establishing the Montgomery Dignity Foundation. It will be fully funded with the liquidated assets from that now-defunct division." Sarah stared at the tablet, her eyes widening. You're turning their company into a charity?" "A non-profit," Marcus clarified. "Specifically, an organization dedicated to providing immediate legal counsel, mentorship, and professional support for women of color who face discrimination and harassment in corporate environments. The goal is not to punish the perpetrators," Amelia said, "but to empower the victims. We'll offer full scholarships, litigation funding, and mental health resources. The foundation will be headquartered in the former Montgomery Investments building. Your new office, Sarah." Sarah didn't speak for a long moment. She looked at the sticky stain on her shirt, then back at Marcus. "My new office? Marcus, I don't want to run a charity." "You already are." Marcus smiled, a true, warm smile this time. "You ran the field research for 6 months. You understand the pain points, the toxic cues, and the strategies necessary to truly enact change better than any executive I know. You were literally wearing the uniform of your mission." He reached out and gently touched the stained fabric. "That dress will be framed, Sarah, as the first exhibit in our lobby. A reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of dignity are performed in silence under the most humiliating circumstances." The SUV pulled away from the curb. In the rear-view mirror, Sarah saw the former employee standing forlornly on the sidewalk. She wasn't angry anymore. She was victorious. The final voiceover played out over a panoramic shot of the Montgomery Tower, transitioning to a high-tech, welcoming lobby where diverse women were being greeted by smiling professionals. They had thrown Coca-Cola on her because they saw a cleaner's daughter. They never realized they were dousing the wife of a titan. But the true story isn't about revenge. It's about the profound dignity of the woman who held her tongue long enough to expose a cancer on the corporate world. Sarah Montgomery took the ultimate humiliation and turned it into the ultimate victory, proving that true power isn't about the money you have, but the justice you can buy for those who have none. She wasn't given a clean-up job. She was given a mandate. And in a world where corporate cruelty is the norm, the Montgomery Dignity Foundation now ensures that for every action of hate, there will be an immediate, unstoppable answer of justice. The utter chaos Marcus had ignited faded into the panicked shuffling of the dismissed employees, their frantic whispers drowned out by the metallic slap of the trash, cans they emptied, and the rip of tape on the boxes they filled. Marcus stood like a monolith, ignoring the emotional maelstrom he created, his focus entirely on his wife. "Are you ready for the deep dive, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear the promise of retribution within it. "I'm more than ready, Marcus," she replied, her eyes fixed on Bethany, who was frantically shoving files off her desk into a bin, tears streaming down her face. "But the surface fire isn't enough. I need the root, the real reason they thought they could get away with it." Marcus nodded, already turning toward the CEO's office. "It's never just a few bad apples, darling. The barrel is always rotten at the base." He strode into CEO James Hawthorne's office, a sterile box of chrome and glass. Hawthorne was hunched over his mahogany desk, dialing a phone, his face a sickly gray. "Cancel the call, James," Marcus commanded, leaning one hand flat on the desk. "You're talking to the major shareholder now. No lawyers, no PR teams, just us." Hawthorne swallowed hard, slowly placing the receiver back in the cradle. "Mr. Montgomery, I was unaware of the situation with your wife." "Stop. The lies end now," Marcus said sharply. "I have the HR logs. I know Sarah filed 3 formal complaints about the pervasive racism and harassment on this floor. Your response, as CEO, was to transfer those files to an inactive complaints folder and issue a memo on improving administrative tolerance. You protected the environment that humiliated my wife." "Why?" Hawthorne fidgeted with his tie. "Sir, you don't understand the corporate landscape. Firing senior staff over subjective complaints, especially when the employees involved were high performers." "High performers?" Sarah interjected, walking calmly into the office, still wearing the sticky, stained blouse. "Bethany's team generated $10 million in revenue last quarter. How much did the Black and Latina female employees earn, while being denied bonuses and promotions year after year, James?" Marcus pulled out a tablet and slammed it onto the desk. "I didn't wait for your internal audits, James. I ran my own. My teams went through 3 years of financial records overnight. I found systemic wage disparity in the administrative pool. Specifically, a 20% lower average salary for Black and brown female employees with the same job title as their white counterparts. And that's not subjective complaints, James. That's wage theft and racial discrimination, a federal offense." Hawthorne paled further. That's not my doing. That's the legacy system. It's always been this way." "And you perpetuated it," Marcus countered. "But we are not here to discuss your moral failings. We are here to discuss the true corporate secret you tried to bury." Marcus gestured to Sarah. "Tell him, Sarah, what was your original report about before the harassment started?" Sarah stepped forward, her quiet voice now carrying the authority of a prosecuting attorney. 3 months ago, before I went deep cover, my job was to audit the foundation's portfolio investments. I flagged the subsidiary for a pattern of rejecting minority business loans, despite excellent projections. Your official explanation was lack of cultural fit. My investigation here confirmed that lack of cultural fit is code for systemic prejudice. Marcus leaned down, his face inches from the CEO's. "So, you didn't just allow my wife to be humiliated. You were actively running a major corporation that systematically rejected opportunities for Black enterprise, while simultaneously suppressing the wages of Black employees inside your own walls. You built your success on a foundation of discrimination, James." He straightened. "That is not a corporate secret. That is a corporate crime." Hawthorne finally broke. He buried his face in his hands, defeated. "The board will destroy me. I'll lose everything." You lost everything the moment you chose institutional malice over human decency, Marcus said flatly. He turned to Sarah. The full report has been filed with the SEC, the Department of Labor, and the Civil Rights Division. The lawsuit is already public. Now, for the final act of dignity. He looked at Hawthorne. You are resigning immediately. I will accept your resignation as an admission of corporate negligence, which will save your prison sentence, but not your reputation. The entirety of your personal severance package will be diverted to a fund for the underpaid employees on this floor. Sign this form now. Hawthorne, a broken man, scrawled his signature. Marcus took the document, a simple sheet of paper that represented the end of a career built on systemic corruption. It's over, Marcus announced to Sarah, tucking the paper away. The company is dissolved, the lawsuits are flying, and the perpetrators are ruined. But what about the victims who didn't get fired? Sarah asked, her mind already shifting from retribution to reform. The low-level employees who tolerated that environment because they needed the paycheck. Where do they go now? Marcus smiled, his eyes alight with deep, proud love. They go to the Montgomery Dignity Foundation, which we are launching this afternoon. And you, my darling, are its chief executive officer. They stood together on the private executive heliport, watching the sun set over the city skyline. Below them, the former office building was now silent, emptied of its toxic inhabitants. I don't need revenge, Marcus, Sarah said, running her hand across the dark, sticky stain on her blouse one last time. I need the promise that no other black woman in this city has to walk into an office and risk humiliation just to earn a living. That is the mission, Marcus confirmed, handing her a key card. It was engraved with the logo of the Montgomery Dignity Foundation. The liquidated assets from Hawthorne's division, all the diverted bonuses, and a considerable matching fund for my capital. All goes to the foundation. We will be providing legal defense, financial literacy training, and guaranteed executive mentorships to women of color across the country. He looked at her, his voice soft. Your new office is the top floor of the Montgomery Tower. You have unlimited resources, and you answer to no one but the foundation's mission. You prove you know exactly what a rot is. Sarah, now you will build the cure. Sarah took the key card, her fingers closing around it firmly. She imagined the foundation's future, an organization built on transparency, respect, and zero tolerance for discrimination. Her anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce power. I won't need that dress frame, Marcus, Sarah stated, her voice strong and clear. She was no longer the humiliated administrative assistant, nor the billionaire's wife. She was a leader. I need it burned. The past stays burned. The future is clean. Marcus nodded, his pride in her evident. As you wish, CEO Montgomery. The final voiceover played out over a series of impactful visuals. Montage shot of the new foundation's sleek, welcoming headquarters, diverse women smiling as they received mentorship, lawyers filing master class action suits, and the principal Hawthorne, shown packing his own meager possessions from his old desk alone. The world assumed Sarah Montgomery was defined by the coffee stain on her chest. They never knew it was a symbolic baptism. She took the ultimate public humiliation and used it as a foundation for a silent revolution. The 40% controlling interest in a hostile company was liquidated to build a 100% empowering foundation. The co-workers who threw Coca-Cola on a black woman because they mistook her dignity for weakness were all fired. Their entire department dissolved. But the true story is the rise of CEO Sarah Montgomery, who proved that the greatest power in life isn't found in a bank account, but in the unwavering resilience of a woman who decides she will no longer be silent. Her ultimate revenge was not just watching them fall, but ensuring that where their malice once stood, her legacy of justice would forever rise. The moment the helicopter lifted Marcus and Sarah from the rooftop, sealing the fate of the toxic office below, the final, private chapter of their victory began. Amelia, the chief counsel, was already on a video conference, finalizing the legal documents that would execute Marcus's vision. The asset transfer is complete, Sarah, Amelia stated, her voice crisp and efficient. The full liquidation of the subsidiary's corporate holdings, including all real estate and financial instruments, is being channeled into the Montgomery Dignity Foundation. It's a clean, tax-efficient transfer of wealth directly into social justice. Sarah looked out the window as the office building receded below them, the sticky cola on her shirt serving as a powerful, visceral reminder of the day's events. "What about the individuals?" she asked, her voice steady. "Bethany, Chloe, Denise. They don't just get to walk away with severance and find new jobs." Marcus answered, his eyes fixed on her. "They won't." Bethany, as head of marketing, was tied directly to the systemic discriminatory practices my team uncovered. The SEC and Department of Labor are now reviewing her full digital footprint for complicity in wage fraud and hostile environment charges. Her career is not only over, but her reputation will be permanently tied to this corporate collapse. "And Chloe and Denise?" Sarah pressed, remembering their snickering faces. Amelia chimed in, scrolling through a document on her tablet. "They are being named co-defendants in the class action suit, Sarah. Their participation in the physical assault, the Coca-Cola incident, is the core evidence of the hostile environment. Their professional careers are immediately blacklisted across every Montgomery-affiliated business, and their legal fees will drain their assets. They are personally ruined, not just fired." Sarah finally allowed herself a small, cold smile of satisfaction. Good. That stain needs to cost them everything they thought they had. The helicopter landed softly on the private rooftop of the Montgomery Tower, the jewel of the city skyline. It was a moment Sarah officially crossed the final boundary, leaving the world of the abused cleaner's daughter behind for the world of the CEO. They moved from the cold efficiency of the chopper into a vast, sunlit office suite. The decor was intentional. Not gold and marble, but warm woods, high ceilings, and walls lined with inspiring photographs of historical black leaders and activists. Marcus walked her to the largest desk in the room, which faced a breathtaking view of the city. On the desk, laid out on a plush velvet cloth, was a single, bespoke navy blue suit with a simple, elegant lapel pin, the foundation's logo. "This is your office, Sarah. The entire floor is yours. The desk is yours. The mission is yours," Marcus said, gesturing to the suit. "Change your clothes. Change your title. Your first board meeting is in an hour." Sarah picked up the suit, her eyes reflecting the quiet determination that had defined her even in the moments of her greatest humiliation. She disappeared into the private changing room. When she emerged, the stained white blouse was gone. The crisp, clean lines of the navy suit replaced it. Her posture was straighter, her gaze fiercer. She was CEO Sarah Montgomery. Marcus stepped forward and gently pinned the foundation's logo, a stylized, unbroken shield, to her lapel. "Welcome to the job, darling. The first item on the agenda is the legacy strategy." They sat down at the conference table, Marcus and Amelia on one side, Sarah at the head. "Amelia, where is the initial foundation funding going?" Sarah asked, immediately diving into her role. "The first $50 million is earmarked for the Dignity Litigation Fund," Amelia replied. "It's a revolving fund dedicated to challenging systemic discrimination and wage disparity in corporate America. We're offering pro bono legal counsel to any woman of color who has evidence of a hostile work environment." Marcus added, "We're not waiting for them to file reports that get buried by managers like Thompson. We are actively searching for victims, turning them into plaintiffs, and ensuring they have the financial security to fight these battles without risking their livelihoods." Sarah's pen flew across her notebook. "Excellent. The second priority must be prevention. We need to fund educational programs, real programs, not just glossy brochures." "Agreed," Marcus nodded. "We are launching the Corporate Resilience Fellowship. We will bring in young women from historically marginalized communities and mentor them, not just in business, but in legal self-defense, HR compliance, and executive boundary setting. We're teaching them how to spot the toxic cues and how to weaponize the system's own rules against it." Sarah pushed her chair back, a surge of adrenaline replacing the fatigue of the day. "The humiliation I felt, the shock of the cola, it will now pay for the security of thousands. That's the permanent justice." She looked at Marcus, a depth of respect and love in her eyes that surpassed any romantic gesture. "Thank you for not just firing them, Marcus. Thank you for buying me the war." Marcus stood, walking around the table to kiss her hand. "You bought the war with your dignity. Sarah. I just provided the weapons. 3 months later, the former office building was entirely renovated. The exterior was scrubbed clean, the chrome polished, and the brass plaque now read, the Montgomery Dignity Foundation. At the official launch event, a dazzling array of dignitaries, civil rights leaders, and media stood beneath a massive, projected image on the wall. It was a photograph of a woman in a stark white blouse, covered in a dark, sticky stain of Coca-Cola. Sarah stepped onto the stage, dressed impeccably, her foundation shield gleaming. The audience erupted in applause. "You're looking at the photo that started it all," Sarah began, her voice steady and resonant. This was a moment I realized that silence is complicity, and dignity is the most powerful weapon you possess. She pointed to the image. The women who did this thought they were shaming a maid. They didn't know they were funding a revolution. Every dollar of the $200 million endowment was derived from the liquidation of the very company that fostered the prejudice you see in this picture. She paused, letting the magnitude of the statement sink in. "That stain," Sarah concluded, "is not a mark of my shame. It is the Montgomery Dignity Foundation's founding document. It is the final, undeniable proof that the price of injustice is ultimately paid by the perpetrators, and the promise of better, more respectful future belongs to those who refuse to stand down." Marcus watched from the front row, his gaze fixed on his wife, not as the CEO he'd appointed, but as the force of nature she had become. The true power was hers, a legacy built not on the billions he commanded, but on the unwavering dignity she had protected. The vengeance of a billionaire is swift, but the justice of Sarah Montgomery is eternal. She didn't just walk into a new job. She built a sanctuary. She proved that when a system is built to suppress you, the only way to win is to turn its own foundation against it. Today, the Montgomery Dignity Foundation stands as a permanent, powerful answer to every instance of corporate cruelty, ensuring that no black woman will ever have to wear a stain of shame when she has the power to wear the shield of justice. The aftermath of CEO James Hawthorne's forced resignation and the simultaneous filing of the class action lawsuit sent seismic shockwaves through the entire corporate district. Headlines screamed of a major holding company division being entirely dissolved overnight. But the real story wasn't the collapse. It was a construction of the new reality. 3 months had passed since the incident. Sarah, now CEO Sarah Montgomery, stood in the expansive, light-filled corner office of the Montgomery Tower, her new command center. She was no longer wearing bespoke navy suit. Today, she wore a striking crimson dress, reflecting the quiet, fierce power she now wielded. "Amelia, updates on the class action plaintiffs," Sarah commanded, looking over a list displayed on her transparent desk screen. Amelia, the chief counsel, stood ready. "We have over 80 former employees signed on, Sarah." The sheer volume of evidence regarding systemic wage disparity and hostile environment complaints is overwhelming. The parent company is attempting to settle, but we are rejecting every offer. We are taking them to trial. We need the precedent, not the payout. And the perpetrators? Sarah pressed, her voice sharp. "Bethany, Chloe, and Denise." "Their situation is non-negotiable," Amelia confirmed. "They have been unable to secure new employment due to the severity of the public allegations and the personal lawsuits you filed. Bethany is facing a formal ethics review by her professional board, and her assets are frozen pending the outcome of the litigation. They have become cautionary tales, Sarah." Sarah leaned back, a deep sense of justice settling in her chest. "They try to make me an example of humiliation. Now they are the example of consequence. Ensure every future business school textbook mentions their names." The door to her office opened, and Marcus walked in, his expression one of immense pride. He was carrying a small, heavy box wrapped in deep purple velvet. "A gift for the new CEO," he announced, placing the box on the desk. Sarah looked at him, then at the box. "Marcus, the foundation is more than enough. This isn't funding, darling. This is history." She opened the box. Inside, resting on the velvet, was a piece of white fabric, carefully preserved and encased in clear resin. It was a section of the Coca-Cola stained blouse, meticulously cut and mounted. "It's a relic," Sarah murmured, gently touching the cool, smooth surface of the resin. "It's the shield Marcus corrected. It reminds us why we fight. But the real gift is in the other box. He nodded toward a larger, ornate box on the floor. Sarah opened it and gasped. Inside lay a collection of archival documents, original, signed letters, faded sheet music, and a newspaper clipping dating back 40 years. Your mother told me, Marcus explained softly. The real secret wasn't just corporate corruption. It was personal. Your father, the composer, who was promised a lead role in the city's symphony but was sabotaged by the white rival who took his spot. Principal Grayson, Sarah whispered, recognizing the insidious pattern of systemic destruction. The same, Marcus nodded. That symphony was owned by the same holding company that owned the division you just liquidated. The prejudice is generational, Sarah. And now the reparations are, too. Sarah carefully picked up the faded sheet music. Her father's work, silenced, was now here, in her office. The Montgomery Dignity Foundation isn't just about corporate justice, Sarah stated, her eyes burning with newfound purpose. It's about cultural restoration. She issued a final, powerful directive to Amelia. Immediately established the Elias Johnson Arts Grant within the foundation. Fund it with a $10 million endowment. We will acquire the rights to my father's work, professionally record it, and premiere it with the City Symphony. The family that profited from his stolen legacy will now witness its return. Marcus watched, knowing this final act. Using the wealth to resurrect a family legacy deliberately buried by systemic racism was Sarah's truest, deepest victory. The symbolic cola stain had led not just to job security for others, but to the restoration of a stolen history. The most powerful justice is multi-generational. They thought their power was endless, that their corporates would remain buried forever beneath layers of bureaucracy and money. But they forgot that dignity cannot be liquidated, and a legacy, once resurrected, cannot be silenced. CEO Sarah Montgomery's foundation didn't just fire the toxic staff. It dismantled the entire architecture of prejudice. And the stain that symbolized her humiliation became the indelible mark of a revolution, ensuring that where the silence of injustice once reigned, the amplified voice of black dignity would forever be heard. The transition was not instantaneous. While Marcus had dismantled the structure, Sarah knew the rot still clung to the individuals. 2 days after the mass firing, Sarah, Marcus, and Amelia stood in the now-shuttered office, surrounded by the remnants of the division. The air smelled faintly of sticky soda and stale ambition. The physical evidence is clear, Amelia stated, gesturing to boxes of financial records. But the true evidence lies in the digital graveyard. We need to understand the depth of the silence. Marcus had brought in a forensics data team. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for intent. They focused on the internal communication logs of the administrative staff who were fired. A toxic culture is a secret kept by many. It's not just the bully. It's the dozen people who see the abuse, fear for their own jobs, and choose to hit delete instead of reply. Sarah knew that to secure true justice, they needed to amplify the voices of the silent victims who never dared to file a complaint. Sarah sat with a forensics lead, poring over email chains. They found the threads. Casual, cruel jokes at the expense of black and Latina employees. Emails documenting the deliberate misfiling of expense reports. Threads where requests for time off for community events were denied, only to be approved an hour later for a white co-worker's golfing trip. Look at this one, the lead analyst pointed. This is an email chain involving over a dozen non-minority employees. It's titled Sarah's Logistics Husband. It's 5 months of elaborate, collective mockery. They were betting on how long it would take for her to be truly exposed as a fraud. Sarah's throat tightened, but she remained cold. They weren't mocking me, the executive. They were mocking the black woman they assumed was trying to climb above her station. Use that chain, Amelia. Every person on that thread is now a co-defendant in the psychological damage suit. Their silence was active participation. Sarah's first official action as CEO of the Montgomery Dignity Foundation was to meet with the victims. Her focus shifted from the elite perpetrators to the frontline survivors. She met in a quiet, anonymous office with Maria Rodriguez, a Latina administrative clerk who had been in the division for 7 years, but was too terrified to join the lawsuit. "I can't, Ms. Montgomery," Maria whispered, tears in her eyes. "I have 2 children. I need a paycheck. Even if the foundation wins, it will take years. I'll be blacklisted before I see a dime." Sarah leaned forward, her voice warm but firm. "That is the weapon they use, Maria, the need for the paycheck. They knew they could abuse you because they knew you wouldn't risk your family's financial security. The Dignity Foundation is here to disarm that weapon." "Amelia," Sarah directed, "immediately issue Maria Rodriguez a 0-interest, 5-year financial bridge loan sufficient to cover her salary and benefits. It is non-recourse if the lawsuit is lost. We provide her financial security first. We don't ask her to risk her life to fight for her rights." This was the true power of the foundation. It wasn't about the symbolic firing. It was about protecting the dignity of the victim. For Maria, the foundation didn't just offer justice later. It offered freedom now. Maria stared, stunned. You're paying me to fight them?" "We are investing in your dignity," Sarah corrected. "Your testimony is worth more than any stock dividend. Go home, take care of your children, and prepare to tell your truth. You are our first success story." The final, powerful flourish of Act 3 centered on the cultural restoration Sarah had promised Marcus. The Elias Johnson Arts Grant was not merely a gesture. It was a public reclamation. Sarah stood backstage at the City Symphony Hall. The auditorium was packed for the premiere of the Unsung Overture, her father's lost composition. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her. "The old guard is here, Sarah," Marcus noted, gesturing toward the board members of the former holding company, now looking pale and uncomfortable in the front rows. They came to see the final dismantling of their power. The conductor raised his baton. The music began. It was a soaring, triumphant piece, full of deep, rhythmic complexity and a vibrant African-American classical sound that had been denied the stage for 40 years. The silence that had followed the Coca-Cola incident was now replaced by the profound, undeniable sound of a legacy resurrected. The music was a sonic declaration of war against prejudice, a melody that proved what systemic oppression cost the world. During the intermission, a frail, elderly white man approached Sarah. It was a former symphony board member who had sabotaged her father's career. He looked at her, his eyes full of fear and regret. "Ms. Montgomery," he croaked, I knew your father was brilliant. I was just afraid of change. I was weak. The symphony was not ready." Sarah looked him in the eye, not with anger, but with the cold clarity of power. "The symphony was not ready for my father's brilliance, sir, because men like you suppressed it. But that is over. Your fear cost my family 40 years of triumph. The Elias Johnson Arts Grant will ensure that every young, denied composer of color will have their work heard on this stage. Permanently. Your apology is noted, but your system is replaced." She turned her back on him and walked back to her seat, Marcus smiling at her triumph. The final scene montage showed the foundation in full operation. Sarah leading a corporate training session on microaggression accountability. Maria Rodriguez beaming, giving her testimony in court, and the plaque in the foundation lobby reading, "In memory of a stained blouse, in honor of unwavering dignity." The story is not just that a billionaire walked in and fired everyone. The story is that a black woman used her humiliation as the blueprint for an institution of justice. Sarah Montgomery did not just win a battle. She changed the rules of engagement. The Montgomery Dignity Foundation is the answer to every corporate whisper, every casual cruelty, and every systemic barrier. It is the permanent, undeniable assurance that the cost of suppressing dignity will always be the complete collapse of the perpetrator's privilege.